Chapter 1. Isaiah. Nick. Oh, Representative Walters blocked me. LOL. Ian. What? Why? Just because you called him a fascist? Nick. I beg your pardon, I did not call him a fascist. Ian. So I hallucinated that entire exchange. Nick. No, but I called him a fascist dickweasel who jerks off thinking about the Spanish Inquisition. Ian. Oh, right. Well, damn, I can't imagine why he'd block you. Nick. It was the dickweasel thing, wasn't it? That was a step too far. Ian. Absolutely. Nick. Sigh. Ian. If it's any consolation, Senator Conway blocked me for politely asking if he was going to challenge his own win during the last election. I mean, he was voted in on the same ballots he's calling fake, so... Nick. Politely. Ian. Well, I mean, I didn't call him a dickweasel. Nick. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of room between politely and calling someone a dickweasel. Ian. I fail to see how that's relevant. Nick. Yeah. LOL. Ian. LOL. Okay, I have to run, heading to a hockey game. Talk to you later tonight? Nick. Absolutely. Have fun tonight. Go Yellow Jackets. Ian. Go Yellow Jackets. Ian. Holy crap, this game is a wild one. LOL, and I'm still laughing at Representative Walters blocking you. Nick. I'm still laughing about you claiming your post to Senator Conway was polite. Ian. You can't prove it wasn't. Nick. Ugh. Only because it was deleted when you were blocked. Oppression. Communism. Ian. LMAO. Help, help, I'm being repressed. So, are you ever going to actually meet this guy? Darren gestured with his beer can at my phone. I finished sending the message. Then I put the phone face down on my leg and stared out at the ice 4 rows down from where we were sitting. The sheet was currently deserted except for the pair of Zambonis, and I watched them rumbling around the arena as I pretended my cheeks weren't on fire. Maybe. Eventually, my friend elbowed me. Dude, you've been talking to him and saying eventually for how long? When is eventually? I don't know. I shook my head. What if we meet and it ruins everything? Darren exhaled hard, rolled his eyes, and brought up his beer can for a sip. Neither of us spoke for a while. We just watched the Zambonis. This wasn't the first time he'd asked me about meeting Nick. Probably wouldn't be the last either. And lately, I'd been leaning toward doing exactly that. I glanced at my phone, which was still dormant on my leg, and gnawed my lower lip. Nick and I had so much in common. We chatted endlessly about anything and everything. Politics, which was how we'd crossed paths in the first place. Movies we both enjoyed, our love of animals, and the latest historical documentary we were obsessing over. He was as rabidly into hockey as I was, so we could talk for hours about the sport. Well, talk. 4 years in, we'd never spoken on the phone or webcam. We'd never seen each other's faces. Early on, we'd sort of danced around the subject, with both of us making excuses for keeping it to avatars, and then we just never brought it up again. I was painfully curious what he looked like, what he sounded like. The more we connected, the more he took up space in my mind, and the more I craved a look at him. But there was a reason I had that account, and there was a reason I kept it separate from my real name, my real face, and my real life. If I met him, I'd be breaking the barrier between those two worlds, and that terrified me. Squirming in my seat, I looked at Darren. Okay, so, hypothetically, what if I do meet Nick? What if things go to shit? Darren pursed his lips. You don't want to lose your friend. Exactly, but also, I mean, there's a reason I use an anonymous burner account, you know? What if things go to shit between us and he tells the school district about my account or something? Oh, yeah. Darren blew out a breath, deflating a little. That would suck. It would. In fact, Darren was the one person in my entire world who knew about my account, though not my specific username. I'd confided in him about its existence both because he understood firsthand the stress of keeping aspects of one's personal life out of the school district's sight, then because I trusted him more than anyone else. I also had enough dirt on him to disincentivize outing me, which was why we'd joked for a long time about mutually assured destruction. Had Nick and I crossed paths in any other realm, a gaming account, one of my real-life accounts, a dating app, then I wouldn't have thought twice about meeting him or sending a photo. But I'd opened that account specifically so I could be a lot more outspoken about political issues than was compatible with my career, and do some less than professional shitposting when I was bored. The most I dared to do in my real life was moderately support certain political candidates and causes. Even that was enough to get people wringing their hands about me being part of the woke mob or a leftist radical trying to indoctrinate our children. Right. Because I totally had the power to brainwash the same kids I had to beg to finish assigned reading and properly format citations. If my students' parents ever found out the things I said when I was Ian, someone would need to bring fainting couches to the next school board meeting. I didn't even think I was that outrageous, but when you taught in a district where an innocuous rainbow decoration was interpreted as queer grooming, well, it wasn't a good idea to broadcast that you believed certain lives mattered or that a few amendments might need some more modern interpretations. Add to that being openly gay and vocally pro-queer rights, and I was just asking to be professionally screwed over. Hence, Ian. And Ian was the person Nick knew. If he met Isaiah, the middle school history teacher, if the line blurred between Ian and Isaiah, I shivered just thinking about those worlds colliding. Okay, forget it. Meeting wasn't a good idea. I had, for the millionth time, talked myself out of it. Movement and activity pulled me out of my thoughts. People were starting to come back down to their seats with fresh beers and snacks, and the ice crew was cleaning up a few puddles from the Zambonis while someone put the nets back in place. The clock above center ice was counting down the last 8 minutes of the first intermission. Thank God. I was wired now. The clash of fear over what could happen if I met Nick versus worry over what I might be missing by not meeting him had me twitchy and frustrated. And the fast pace of hockey would be a welcome distraction. With 7 minutes left on the clock, Darren said, "You've been talking to him for, 3 years now?" I swallowed. Almost 4? Right. And in that time, he hasn't pushed at all for your name or a picture or meeting. Any of that, right? I nodded. Darren turned to me. Maybe that means he's got as much to lose as you do. What do you mean? Well, like you always joke that I'll never out you because you've got dirt on me, he shrugged. You've got dirt on him too, right? I considered it. Except I have no idea what he does for a living, so that dirt might not matter. But wouldn't that explain why he hasn't pushed for anything? If he didn't have a reason to protect his own identity, he'd have sent you a picture by now. Unless he's catfishing me. Darren barked a laugh and elbowed me. If he's catfishing you, he's seriously playing the long game. Pursing my lips, I stared up at the clock. Just over 6 minutes until I was gratefully distracted. I guess, maybe? So, why not ask? Just throw it out there. And if he says no, Darren half shrugged like it was the most inconsequential thing in the world. Then you keep going the way you've been going. He might have had a point. And now I was suddenly restless with that need to see Nick's face and hear his voice. There was a connection between us. I could feel it. And if we took that connection offline, it could be amazing. Or it could blow up in my stupid face. Still, Darren's comments needled at me. In fact, they needled me so much I suddenly couldn't think about anything else. And like hell was anything going to distract me from hockey. Okay, fine. You win. I took out my phone again and pulled up the app. I'll message him. Darren chuckled and patted my arm. Good luck, man. I hope it works out. As I thumbed out a message, I hoped so too. And And then I sent the message. And... hell. So much for concentrating on hockey.
Chapter 2. Tanner. So, are you ever going to actually meet this guy? Ben's Nat Bennett gestured at my phone with his glove. I shoved my phone back into the pocket of the Pittsburgh Yellow Jackets windbreaker, hanging in my locker stall. As I sat down, I said, "He's just a friend." "Okay." Ben's dropped onto the bench as well, and rubbed a towel over his sweaty face and hair. "So he's a friend. Why not meet him?" I took a swig of Gatorade. "He's an online friend." Ben cocked a brow. Then he shook his head and continued toweling himself off. Fortunately, Coach picked that moment to start in on his intermission speech, which gave me an excuse to not continue this conversation. Didn't do much to get my concentration away from what Benz had said about Ian, though. Several of my teammates had suggested meeting him. They caught me smiling stupidly at my phone so many times, now they'd just say, "Tell Ian we said hi." Every time I spent more than 30 seconds talking to a man they didn't know, or if I posted a vacation photo with a new face in it, even if it was just a selfie with a fan, I'd get grilled about whether that was him. Hell, their partners had gotten in on the action. Tammy, Adamo's wife, had declared last Thanksgiving that, "I can always tell when you've been talking to him." She gestured at her own face. "The way you smile, it's a dead giveaway." Aaron and I met online, Emily, who was engaged to Bucks, told me. It's always kind of scary to meet someone, especially if you've already made a connection, because they might not live up to it. But sometimes, she grinned and held up her left hand, indicating the giant rock on her third finger. "It works out." I got that. I really did. And the truth was, I'd have loved to meet Ian in person, or even see a photo of him. I wished I could work up the courage to send a photo of myself. Hell, just enough courage to tell him my real name. Not that he'd believe me. But man, the thought of talking face to face did things to my heart I couldn't quite define. Sometimes I thought I had feelings for him. Sometimes I thought that was stupid because how could I have feelings for someone I'd never even met? And then other times I'd shut all that down because, no shit, I had feelings for Ian. It didn't matter that all I had was words on a screen. He was funny and smart, and we could rant and rave about politics and hockey and never get bored. Was it too much to hope we'd be the same way in person? And we connected because a person I followed had reposted something Ian had written in response to some dickweed saying that being gay was all about sex and nothing else. Ian had argued that if gay men didn't fall in love, he wouldn't know what it was like to have his heart stomped on. I'd reposted it, adding that, for fuck's sake, our community hadn't pushed for marriage equality just for spite. Then, I'd followed Ian. He'd followed me back. After a few weeks of liking and reposting each other's posts, he'd messaged me privately to snark about someone we'd both been arguing with. Then we just kept messaging, and that was that. So, we'd known from the very, very start that we were both gay. We'd learned very quickly that we were on the same page about more things than not. In fact, about the only things we really disagreed on were football — I love the Broncos and he hated the sport — pizza toppings — olives made me gag — and whether that one overtime goal during last year's cup final should have been called back. No way had that puck fully crossed the line, but whatever. There was undeniably a connection, and we could talk about things that so many people in our lives didn't understand. And, yeah, no shit, I had feelings for him. Why couldn't I have this with someone I knew face to face? And would meeting him in person break that spell? Or would I wonder why in the world I'd waited so damn long, especially when I knew he lived in the same city? Except, I knew why I'd waited. Why I was still hesitating. I was a public figure, and I had created Nick so I could still speak openly about political issues and crack jokes online. The whole point of that persona had been so I could be myself without anyone knowing it was me. If I let the lines blur between Nick and Tanner, then someone could connect me to Nick's posts. I didn't say horrible things or anything, though I could get creatively profane when I was taking on a terrible politician or a troll. But even cursing online or daring to have political opinions absolutely could land me in hot water with my club or the league. I'd seen other players' reputations, and even careers, fall apart over hacked emails, leaked text messages, or badly judged public statements. Still, my gut told me I could trust Ian to keep my secret. So, meet him or don't meet him? Well, those were all things to consider another day. Tonight, I had a game to play, and now that Coach was done talking, everyone was getting their gear back on for the second period. I drained the last of my Gatorade, tossed the bottle in the bin, and started getting myself ready. I pulled my jersey out of my stall and tugged it on over my gear. As I was reaching down to get my helmet, though, a muffled beep told me I had a message. And I was about 99% sure I knew who'd sent it, since the vast majority of my notifications on that particular app came from one person. I froze. I needed to focus on hockey right now. But would I be able to focus if I hadn't read what Ian had sent? Fuck it. I glanced around. The clock said we had 4 minutes to go, which left me 2 before I needed to be heading for the ice. I reached into my locker stall and tugged my phone out of my jacket pocket. And my heart stopped. Ian, you know, as long as we've been talking, do you think we'll never meet in person? I stared slack-jawed at the message. We were on the same page? Oh my God. Did this mean he wanted to meet? And should we? What if we... Hey, Tans. Ben's tapped my skate with his stick. You coming? Oh, shit. The guys were starting to file out of the locker room. I shoved my phone back into my jacket, grabbed my helmet and stick, and managed to catch up in time to get my usual place in line. I skated out onto the ice, determined to pull my focus back. Hockey wasn't one of those games you could play while your mind was someplace else. But my mind wasn't even in this arena anymore. Playing hockey while distracted usually had one of 3 predictable results. 1. A complete inability to be useful offensively or defensively. 2. Huge and costly mistakes that would be replayed until the end of time while people questioned if you were overpaid. And 3. Injuries. In my case tonight, it was an ugly hat trick. I'd been a mess out there, unable to keep track of where everyone was, never mind where that tiny round black thing was. Then I'd finally gotten my shit together enough to steal the puck and break away, and I'd passed it to another forward for a scoring chance, realizing a second too late that there was an opposing defenseman coming up between us. He probably would have scored, too, with that shot he absolutely ripped from the blue line, if I hadn't blocked it with my face instead. And that was the story of how 9.5 minutes into the second period, I was sitting across the hall from the locker room, getting my upper lip stitched. All in all, it wasn't too bad. Hurt like hell, but it had been more of a graze than a direct hit. Not enough to loosen any teeth or break any bones. Just enough to split my lip and give the ice crew a nice pile of red snow to clean up. Hopefully no one orders a cherry snow cone tonight, Benz had said to me as he'd helped my shaky ass off the ice. Very funny, I'd muttered behind the towel I'd been holding against my face. Now that my mouth was numb and the adrenaline had mostly subsided, okay, it was kind of funny. All right. Jack, the team doc, sat back and inspected his handiwork. That should hold your face together while it heals. Great, I muttered. He clapped my shoulder. Let me get you some ice. After he'd brought me an ice pack, he left to give the powers that be an update on my status. Alone in the small room, I sat back against the wall, closing my eyes as I pressed the ice pack to my freshly stitched face. I was still jittery from the adrenaline and the endorphins, but mostly I was pissed at myself for getting here. I mean, there hadn't been much I could do to avoid the puck. They move so damn fast. If one wanted to connect with a face or a knee, or, in those especially cringe-inducing moments, an athletic cup, then there wasn't a whole lot to be done. If anything, at least it got my distracted ass off the ice, so my team could try to win without me screwing everything up. We were playing San Diego tonight, and there was a reason they were in first place in the Western Division by a significant margin. The last thing Pittsburgh needed was a player who couldn't focus. They'd be down a forward for the rest of the night, but Aston would be able to move up from the third line to take my spot. He'd be happy to have some second-line minutes tonight. So the team would be fine. My lip would be fine. Eventually, my pride would be too. And I would take it to my grave that I'd been a mess tonight because of a perfectly benign message from the faceless man I'd been dying to meet. If I was this much of a mess over him, then meeting him would either be better than I could possibly imagine, or it would be a fucking disaster. Somehow I knew to my core that there'd be no in between. Or maybe I was just being dramatic. That happened sometimes when I was drunk on endorphins after an injury. I was steady enough on my feet to wander across to the locker room, then I dug my phone out of my jacket before returning to the room where I'd been sitting. Alone in there, still icing my face, I pulled up the chat app where Ian had suggested us meeting. I chuckled as I read through the conversation we'd been having earlier. It was so fun to have someone who got my sense of humor and liked to stir things up as much as I did. Nothing beat lively political discussions in between sharing memes. I scrolled farther back, reading the messages we exchanged. It was almost constant, too. Obviously not when he was working or I was skating, or when either of us was driving, and we both did have social lives. But the last 4 years of my life had had a steady stream of messages, ranging from jokes to venting about our daily lives, to just chatting about whatever. I paused on one conversation from a month or so ago. Nick, how was your day? Ian, some family issues. Nick, frowning emoji. Sister again? Ian, how'd you guess? Nick, what's she salty about this time? Ian, my niece's birthday is next week, and she's mad I won't make the drive. Nick, it's a few hours, isn't it? Ian, yep, and I absolutely can't get time off, so I'd have to drive out Friday night and come back on Sunday. I told her I'm coming home for my niece's graduation. I can't do it twice. Nick, I'm sure your niece understands. Ian, she does. I sent her a gift, too, and I'll call her. My sister just gets super mad whenever anyone doesn't prioritize her kids over literally everything. Nick, OMG, my brother's ex was like that. Ian, yeah? Nick, God, yes. The world needed to stop for her son. I mean, I adored the kid, but I was traveling abroad for something really important the same week he graduated from 6th grade. I'm not cutting that trip short to come, you know? Ian, for a 6th grade graduation? Yikes, that's seriously over the top. Nick, exactly. She cold-shouldered me for like 3 months after that. Ian, what made her come around? Nick, nothing. My brother broke up with her. Ian, oh, yeah, that's one way to end a standoff. Nick, right? LOL. I miss the kid, though. Ian, I bet. Nick, and don't get me wrong, she was really nice most of the time. She just got tunnel vision when it came to her kid and everyone else's lives. Ian, my sister is the same way. I love her, and we mostly get along. She just gets big mad anytime she thinks one of her kids isn't being prioritized. Nick, I don't envy you. We talked about families in vague terms, never specifically telling each other where we were from or the names of key players. Still, I felt like I knew him. Really, really knew him. Like, I even had a sense of his sister, her kids, his parents. So what was I missing by keeping this electronic wall between us? I adjusted the ice pack, wincing a little. The local was starting to wear off, letting in a dull ache that would probably be a full-blown throb before too much longer. And I probably looked spectacular. Jack had said there was some bruising on my upper lip and my cheek, and given how many stitches I'd needed, I could imagine I looked like I had a caterpillar wandering below my nose. Yay. Wouldn't this be an awesome time for Ian to see my face? I actually laughed at that, which hurt. Because, yeah, the feeling was coming back. Ow. It occurred to me then that Ian was probably here. He told me earlier he'd be watching the game tonight. In fact, now that the haze of endorphins was clearing and my brain was catching up, I was pretty sure he'd said he had tickets. He was a huge Yellow Jackets fan, and he came to a lot of games. He even went to away games sometimes. If he didn't come to the arena, he watched on TV. When the Yellow Jackets are at home, the broadcast is blacked out in Pittsburgh, he'd said one time. Shame about my VPN that gets around all that nonsense and lets me watch. So, whether from a seat somewhere in the stands or the comfort of his own home, he'd almost certainly watch me try to eat that puck tonight. If nothing else, he'd definitely see the replay sooner or later. Oh, God. How many of my other greatest mistakes had he witnessed without knowing it was me? Hell, maybe meeting him was a bad idea after all. You're just a coward, Jeffries. Yeah, probably.